Humanity's greatest breakthrough is deciding to remain one with the power of nature over technology. Technology is not bad. Technology can be very helpful, but technology must know its place. Trying to replace the power of nature with technology is a no. Technology as support, as help, can be beneficial to humans' growth and development, such as virtual reality, being able to use Zoom to connect to people all across this planet for education, for community, for sharing, and for connecting is very helpful and supportive of expanding the mind. But technology that tries to interfere with the power of nature, trying to control and manipulate the power of nature, can have latent effects that are very damaging to the human progress. The great battle that we are experiencing right now is needing to make that choice. To make that choice. When we envision our future, do we want our technology to replace the power of nature? Or do we want to have a future where we are in communion with the power of nature? And when we visualize these two futuristic, prophetic dreams of ourselves, which one is going to give us the most fulfillment? And I think by and large, we would all agree it's the prophetic dream of our future through being one with the power of nature. But we need to make that decision within ourselves and collectively, because we can go into this deeper into this technology. We can mutate ourselves, which we are kind of doing that now, sort of distorting the DNA. Because technology is not just a robot or a device. It can also be technology used to create artificial food, right? It can be something that you inject into your body, something that you consume, right? And it can also be psychological, right? The technology through social media or through the algorithms is like a technology. It's used to put something in your mind, right? To alter something. So the technology I'm talking about, there's many levels to it. It's not just a satellite or a computer. It can also be a psychological, right? That can be used as a way to get your attention, to get you to do something, right? Because, you know, the real kind of technology is the workings of the mind and the psychological, the physiological. And we can kind of use that foundational technology given to us from Mother Earth, which is about creation, right? How things come into an existence, which is actually very spiritual nature. It's actually not what we think as in this advancing technology through just the intellect. It's actually very spiritual nature. Because when we die, we're not going to bring most of whatever this technology stuff with us. It can't cross through the barriers of dimensions. But the spiritual energy can. The mind can. The mind can. The mind is the original technology. Everything that comes from it, such as, these devices, are an extension of the mind. And when we try to use that thing to change the mind or to get the mind to be something or to go in a certain direction, is actually very unnatural. Because the mind naturally has a way about itself where it can grow and it can develop itself. And what really strengthens the mind is the awakening of the heart. So the heart is raising in humanity through the earth. And what that means is we're starting to become more spiritually refined and spiritually mature and starting to understand how the true nature of reality works. And what that means is we are taking more responsibility for our mind and for the workings of our mind. Okay, so no longer are we victims to our mind. We're starting to become the liberators of our mind. We're starting to become the healers of our mind. We're starting to access the gifts and talents of wisdom within ourselves to reframe, reparent, reshape our mind. And that is coming from this deep spiritual core that we all have, this spiritual groundedness, where we're one with the power of nature. And we're using that connection respectfully to help upgrade ourselves, to help us align with the current times, because all these times that we're in with this Aquarian age is going to require a human being to be different from before. And this quantum leap has a lot to do with we need to get stronger in our energy bodies than we have before. Because not only are we using the primal energy body, of course, the mental and the emotional, we're also starting to tap into a more expanded version of the human incarnation than what we've had, in our past, in the Dark Age. The Dark Age, we were using, a lot of our energy bodies were atrophied. They were underdeveloped because of the times. But now those energy bodies that may have been dormant or atrophied or just were not being used are now being used, right? So in our Dark Age, we were really atrophying the feminine, right? The matriarchal. We were really atrophying that. It was very dormant. I mean, it was there, but there was a lot. It was not, the energy bodies associated with that were not really being used because of the times, right, that we were in. Now they're being used. So what that means is the human being is becoming a lot more expanded because it's accessing more of its life force than probably what it was before, right? Because we're moving away from the Dark Age. And what that means is these energy bodies is going to give us a lot more perspective, a range of understanding, and a lot more talents and gifts. And it's going to give us a lot more ways of accessing the mind. So we're not going to be so feeling limited or restricted in the ways of the mind and how to unlock and upgrade the mind. So with the power of the earth, human being is going to upgrade the mind with whatever the technology. It's like the ignorance in it, like the shininess, like, oh, attractive, it looks so cool, but it actually can degrade the mind. It can stagnate the mind, right? It can actually really, it's like junk in the mind. It can really put stuff in the mind that is actually not really going to help the mind become more sophisticated, right? So you'll see those, within, that distortions of whatever this technology in using that, it's like they're not connected to their natural creative intelligence, right? And it can dull the life force energy, and that also can come through the technology we have with too much social media or too much video game or too much television, or it's the uprootedness when you start to, instead of connecting to the power of earth in connecting to your earth energy, right, or the four directions, you're getting very arrhythmic with that, right? We need to find the balance, right? Some people are not at all working in the balance of this earth, in the power of nature. They're so far into whatever social media every single day for years and years and years and years, right? And that is even possible for our future generations, right? That there's this complete disturbance going on in their mind, complete distortion, obstruction in the mind, perversions, because a lot of this stuff that we're putting into the mind, it's not necessarily coming from the Aquarian age. It's coming from it's coming from a heavily controlled place, right? Because a lot of the technology is in kind of opposition to the power of nature. Not all of it, right? But the version of it that has to do with the mutating of the human being, or that has to do with the controlling of the human being, or the sort of mimicking the human being, in a way of trying to become a superior over human being, trying to take away the power of the human being's natural ability to be highly sophisticated, undermining the human being, undervaluing the human being, trying to be this hierarchy over the human being, right? The human being is becoming seemingly shrinking or less than the technology. That is the thing that creates a lot of weakness in the human mind. So the great intention for humans from the earth is for human beings to decide to move more closely with the power of nature over this seeming powerful technology that's supreme, right? And more advanced, like a god, you see me more advanced and superior and knows everything, or is the source of creation, or that kind of thing, that kind of mindset. And allowing, making the decision of the power of nature and allowing the consciousness to raise, and the creative intelligence of the human being to replace the technology. Okay, meaning we still have these great inventions and innovations, but the creative intelligence is of the supreme order. When we think of it, it is it's governing. It's the leadership over the technology, the creative intelligence, right? As long as we can keep that, where the human mind is always going to be the leader of the technology, is always going to be seen as the we remember that it comes from the mind, right? Not our mind comes from that. Like, for example, common sense going out the window because we think the mind comes from what we see on social media. We think our common sense comes from whatever propaganda. No, right? Our mind does not come from whatever we're seeing or whatever. It doesn't determine or decide what our mind is to become, right? Our mind decides what this thing will become, what our social media thing will become, or, whatever we believe, or our common sense about certain things, right? The thing, recognizing that our mind, right, is deciding. It's independent of this thing. It can be influenced, right? But when we start to connect to the power of nature, our common sense and our creative intelligence is leadership over whatever is being thrown at us through technology, or whatever is being told or said, or whatever the thing is. Because technology is split from the mind. It's an extension of the mind. It's not the source, right? So, people are very confused and lunacy because they don't understand their mind is the source of all of this advancements. So it's the mind that is the source. It's the purity of this. The technologies is not the purity. It's an extension of something that is in you, your mind. So when we can go to the purity of it, right? Not the not the version of it, right? The original, right? That's when we're going to start to recognize the human being for its value, and then recognize also a future on this planet where human beings are actually they're in the responsibility of their own mind, right? And they're all and then they're also in the experience of what they really want to have. Because sometimes it's like people are like wrapped up in this technology, and their mind is being made up by whatever this external thing is, right? Mind is made up by this external thing. And it's like people are not really having the experience of this earth that is actually very magical. It's not really coming from a place of authenticity or autonomy, or it really in like a dignity, right? So it's like when the mind it's recognized as the source of everything that we see in whatever outside of ourselves, that's when we start to have people will be in experiences that are really fulfilling for them, right? Because the workings of their mind are actually starting to come into an experience of itself. But when we're just letting our mind being made up by these things, we're never really going to have the real experience of what reality and what determines our reality, right? And what actually leads our reality, which is the makings of the mind. So it's like technology can kind of take that away, right? That and create either this gray experience where everybody is, like having whatever is the same thing, or it can try to make an experience what it wants to be, or whatever, that kind of thing. But the leadership of what makes our experience is our mind, whether we allow our mind to be conformed to something or made up by this thing, right? This technology, or we allow our mind to remain close to the power of nature and have that remembrance that no, it's that deep inner mind that with that spiritual groundedness that actually really decides the kind of reality I live. So I have full accountability and responsibility for the experiences that I can have in my future, or even in my moments moving forward. And that's going to make people a lot more grounded, a lot more rhythmic, and people are actually going to be a lot more happy with the kind of experience they're in. They're going to be a lot more in clarity, right? And they're also going to have a lot more of a total body experience, right? All of their energy systems are going to be really working together in this harmony, and the human being is going to have a lot more of this ability to manifest very extraordinary things that goes even beyond technology. It has a lot to do with the creativity, right? I mean, technology is an invention, yeah, but what we see it right now, I mean, the platforms that we see, it can be used, is helpful and supportive for the creativity. But the creativity in the Renaissance is very something different. These are skills and talents that technology can be like a container to connect people with other people for that, but it's not the Renaissance itself. Technology age is not called a Renaissance. A Renaissance has to do with the mind being able to go inside itself and recognize the source, that source energy, right? That mind is the source of this reality, this existence, this experience. And then start to go into the soul's journey completion, that ethereal, almost spiritual core, that spiritual heart, that spiritual groundedness, and start to open up this creative flow, this creative connection with the earth, right? Where you're feeling the power of earth coming through you and wanting to express itself through your creativity, your vision of creation, and your connection to the true nature of reality, right? From the place of the pure mind. And then that starts to kind of do this workings in the mind, right? Starts to give this ideas, these imprints in the mind. And that starts to become like these gifts and talents we start to bring to our life that start to have this renaissance of it, right? This renaissance where many, many people are actually really starting to level up in their creative intelligence and what they have to say, what they have to do, right? And technology is not going to offer that. As we see it right now, it's really not going to offer creative intelligence. It's actually kind of opposition of it in some ways, right? In what we see it, it's actually kind of anti-evolution in many ways, anti-human growth. The real creative intelligence that we're going to see that's going to surpass this technology, okay, in the community, in the economy, in the renaissance of it, is the human going into the pure mind, not a version of the mind. That's the virtual realities, it's like a external version of the mind that's like a replica. It's like a clone. Technology is like a clone of the mind. It's not real, right? You think, oh, your clone is you. It's not real. It's like a copy. It's not the original. Okay, you know what I'm saying? So it's not going to have the original the wisdom of it, right? It may have this and the other, but it's not going to have the channel. It's not going to have the spiritual groundedness. It's not going to have the spiritual core, right? A clone, a copycat, whatever that is, it's not going to have the spiritual groundedness, the spiritual core, no matter what. It looks the same, acts the same, talks the same, whatever, right? So the mind, the pure mind, right, that we go into, like a child's mind, right? That is the original, right? That's the place we go into where we start to really find the creative intelligence. And those people, a lot of people are trying to get to that place or working into that place because the Aquarian age is all about coming from that place. And the more that people come from the clone, the replica, the copycat place, they're finding themselves more confused. They're finding their mind is not very creative. They're finding their mind imposter syndrome, where it's like oh my God, my mind's like all these other people, right? In a way that is actually not intelligent. They're actually outsourcing their intelligence. They're very externalized, meaning they're not listening to their common sense, their instinct. They're actually replacing it with this external technology, like putting the technology in replace of that. And they're finding themselves like copycat, a clone of their own life, right? Like they don't feel like they're actually themselves. Their mind is not independent. Their mind is not even extraordinary. It's like a mind of like a bunch of minds that are all the same, right? And that's a sign. That's like a symptom of what, being, it's like buying into this version of your mind that isn't even the original, right? And then there's so much lunacy with that, and there's so much frustration with that, and there's so much undervaluing and underestimating and undermining your pure mind, right? Because the shiny, attractive thing, this ignorance of it is like, no, just go for that, do that thing, whatever the technology is like really broadcasting in your mind, right? But it's not real, because it's a version of your mind. It's an external thing. It's not a source. It's not coming from the pure place in your mind. And the Renaissance is, when we look at Da Vinci, Tesla, Einstein, all of these people were coming from the pure mind, the source of this existence of creation, which is that remembrance, that knowing of that creative intelligence that is within a spiritual core, within a spiritual groundedness of you, that's amplified by the power of nature. So it's a very different movement through this time and space. It's a very different experience that people will be living. Very, very different. It's almost like the creative intelligence is a lot higher, right? People are participating in the Renaissance, not the technology of this earth. It's very different. The Renaissance of this earth is using technology, right? Is using Zoom, is using virtual reality, is using this thing to connect. But it's the mind, the pure mind, the source of it, the source of what we call everything, is very independent of it. It's leading itself according to the power of nature, according to the spiritual core, the spiritual heart, the spiritual groundedness. It's not leading itself because of whatever the clones out there that are just replicating and regurgitating themselves, right? And following in that, right? They're actually, the creative intelligence has nothing to do with really the technology, right? It has everything to do with your respect with nature, your spiritual groundedness. And those people who are not spiritually grounded, you can feel like they are very, they're in their mind, but it's like they're in this disruptive intelligence where it's not actually doing anything for them. They're thinking all day long. Yes, I'm intelligent, I'm logical, but they're very trapped in that. They're actually not even thinking of anything. It's not even really important thinking. It's not even really valuable thinking, but they think it is. They're like, oh, this is thinking, but they're actually not getting anywhere with it, right? That's the thing. It's like you're thinking, but you're not getting anywhere with it, right? It's like, it's like playing a video game all day. It's like you're not really getting anywhere with your mind. It's like you're just going through the same cycle again with your mind, and it's like you're not getting anywhere, right? And that's what a lot of people are very spiritual and grounded. It's like, yeah, they're thinking, yeah, they have this intelligent logic, but it's like it's being used as a way to try to not be in your heart. Is a way to try to override your heart, your common sense, your instinct. So you have to be careful with this technology because it wants to. Sometimes because we can allow it to have power over us, that we think, but we're allowing it to override our common sense, our instinct. And then eventually we can allow it to override our spiritual groundedness, to replace our spiritual groundedness. Right. And then, people have the connection to the power of nature way out of rhythm. They're not at all in their creative intelligence, right? And then they're frustrated because their mind is in this group think. One thing about a renaissance is that we're not in a group think. We may be in a sharing, we may be in similarity, right? We may have a technique that we're all sharing and using that same technique for painting or whatever, but we're not in this group think in the way that majority thinks that they're an imposter. We're not in that. We're in this expansion where everyone is in their own kind of creative intelligence flow that is very extraordinarily dynamic and original to the pure mind of that person. And that's the thing that we'll see, as people are not spiritually grounded, is that a lot of people, it's all the same, or it's scratching the surface. It's not going anywhere. It's not deep. It's thinking, but it's not really going anywhere. Right? The gifts and the talents, they're not entirely refined. They're not coming from a spiritual core, a spiritual groundedness. They're not having this deep, deeper mind. It's not coming from this original place within the power of nature, the source energy within ourselves, the wholeness. So the spiritual journey is a real thing. It's the deciding to have more of a spiritual journey than to have just a journey of groupthink, which is heavily influenced by what we think is technology. And I'm seeing more technology as propaganda, right? At this point, or technology that is trying to tamper with intelligence, right? Technology that really has no place in the human intelligence, right? It's more of a distraction. It puts in more lunacy than it actually really puts in support for the connection to the mind. So that's what I'm talking about. And you'll see people who are really in that, and it's just, after a while, there's this real deep, feeling of the imposter, feeling of not really being in touch, right? And being disconnected from nature, as well as not really having your own mind. You can't access that pure mind. You can't go into that creative intelligence, right? You are feeling like it's difficult to go into that place. It's difficult to have an experience of reality that's original, where you are coming from that pure place in the mind that's very quiet, that's very peaceful, that's very extraordinary, right? In its psychic refinement, in its spiritual groundedness, in its spiritual core, in its spiritual heart. So this is the great decision for humanity. The greatest breakthrough is the decision to remain one with the power of nature in respect, right? Or we can choose to experience that spiritual ungroundedness where we don't really get where we want to go, right? We don't really, our mind is not really our own. Or we're in this group thing, we feel like an imposter. We're just not really in the wholeness of the mind. We're not really in that the source energy of that mind. We're not really in the integration of the mind. We're not in the creative intelligence of the mind. We're in intelligence of the mind, but it's not coming from that real spiritual groundedness, which is like this visionary, like unlocking. That technology is not going to unlock. It's not going to unlock the fifth dimension, the seventh dimension. It's not. That's not. It's bound mostly to this third dimension that we live in, right? It's that creative intelligence that unlocks these higher dimensions, these other galactic regions, these psychic gifts, these talents, these skills, these gifts that set people apart in the way that they can see into other things. They have this way, this sense, this touch, this sensory awareness that is almost really sublime, and it almost transcends the kind of the world that we live in, and the ideas and concepts and constructs we have about what the human mind and the human sense is capable of accessing. This is what we're talking about, the source of the mind being this core of the universe, as Tesla said, coming from this very sublime cosmic place of this limitlessness, this boundlessness, this being able to the visionary seeing, right, like a seer, like a sage, seeing into the vastness of who we are. That's the expansion. Technology is not going to offer that. It's not going to help people to become seers and sages. It's not going to help people, right, in its group think, in its kind of in its infiltration, right? It's being it's like this entity that wants to interact with the mind as a way to try to maybe even replace the mind, right? To get the mind to be what it wants to be, like through its programming, right? Even hijack the mind. Also, it's just kind of, it's working with the mind, but it's not really allowing the mind to really spiritually grow. And this is there's different levels to technology. Like I said, it's helpful and it's supportive to our growth, right? It can bring so much healing to us, right? When we think of like medical technology, machinery, right, used for helping people with major issues, heart, liver transplant, these type of things. That's a very valuable technology. But I'm talking about it's like an entity in it, right? That it could be propaganda, it could be like being used by the wrong people, right? Infiltrated as is a way of like negativity, right? Because there's a lot of perversion that's being dumped into technology now. I'm talking about the entity of it. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of control in it, a lot of undermining the mind, right? Because when we look at technology, for example, robotic surgery for removing of tumor and ovary, there's the doctor, the mind of the doctor and the karma of the doctor is what really brings in the technology, as in supporting the surgery, right? And the doctor's maneuvering of it, the usage of it, right? That is the thing that creates the progress, right? And that's what we call is being used because it's being led by the creative intelligence of a mind. When it's not being led by creative intelligence of a mind, right? Such as a doctor is using it to because the creative intelligence is like the maneuvering of something to bring a greater experience, right, for someone. When it's not you being used by that, and it's being used by a no mind, right, in the context of it's not being led at all by creative intelligence, that's when it becomes very distorted and distortive to the human. So that's why the creative intelligence is actually more important to develop that before we go deeper into technology, because that's the thing that's going to lead. That's the thing that's going to determine the technology in the magic, and what kind of quality it will be, what kind of how we will relate to it, how we will use it, how we will understand it. So when we're having the creative intelligence leading it, right, as it is the source of it, right, it's not there's not a power struggle with it, right, then what happens is the Renaissance will be the prevailing force of this planet, which has a lot to do with connection, communication, and community. Okay, connection, communication, and community will be the main prevailing thing of this planet, and technology will be just a little voice, like a little, a support, a system. It's going to be a system like we have many systems. It's not going to be a system that we see in our dark age past where it's completely undermining us. It's completely taking from us. It's not allowing us to go anywhere. It's binding us. We're bound to these systems. We already have a lot of systems that are very binding. Okay, bound, we feel bound to these systems. We're working through them now. We're dissolving them. We don't need, especially this globalization technology thing that is creating another system in which we feel bound to that. So if the creative intelligence, which comes from the power of nature, really, all brilliant ideas come from this profound power of nature, right? Einstein, Tesla, Da Vinci, right? It's through the spiritual groundedness when you're connecting to the wisdom of a tree or the wisdom of the earth. It's a very almost extraordinary kind of mind that it goes in this infinite place, right? The source energy of everything, right? Creation comes from this ethereal, sublime force that technology can't even possibly comprehend. It can try to replicate it through like a virtual reality of going through a forest, right? But it's nowhere close. It cannot replicate the energy bodies it can try to clone, but it cannot. It cannot replicate or clone the spiritual core, the spiritual groundedness. It's a distortion. It looks like it, it talks like it seems like it, but it doesn't give you the creative intelligence that you need to be able to really move through these places, to manifest or to do the workings in the mind so that you can have that direct experience of having an idea and seeing it actually manifest in the physical through your own craftsmanship, your own creativity, right? So creative intelligence has everything to do with connection, communication, and community. And that will be the prevailing force. That will give us a renaissance on this planet, right? A renaissance on this planet. And I think the great shakeup that we're having, the great, technology is causing a huge shakeup. The entity of it, right, which can be led either by creative intelligence, because there's different leaders of it, or it can be led by a no mind, which is, like you're going into like whatever, video game, and you have a no mind, meaning you are not leading it. You're letting it lead you. Okay, you're letting it replace your common sense, your instinct, and then you're addicted, and you're upset, you're an imposter, you're frustrated, you're not even thinking for yourself, you're groupthink, you're not an original anymore, it's undermining you, it's devaluing you, it's right. So it depends on, you have to decide the place you want to be within your technology, the creative intelligence or the no mind, right? So the Renaissance is from the human beings making the decision to be in the power of nature, making the decision to be in the ethereal, spiritual, emotional, be in the energy bodies, and to develop the fullness of the energy bodies, because technology will put a cap. It will try to stop, some of the energy bodies from developing. It may even be very persuasive at telling you that, you shouldn't develop your energy bodies, your life force, your own independent mind, right? Your connection to nature, and may be persuasive and say you don't need it anymore, right? And that's the ignorance. Like, you do it and you, oh yeah, that's so cool, but then it doesn't give you the experience that you really want, which is the visionary manifestation of your most talented, gifted mind out into your physical that you could ever have, right? So, this is where people start to think the same, act the same. We reach a cap within our talents and gifts, and right, and we don't go any further. We don't know how to get to the boundless, the infinite. We don't know how to get to the sublime, the consciousness, and the deeper layers of it, and the deeper many levels of it, right? That has to do with our spiritual core, spiritual groundedness, that decides the kind of level of renaissance we will have on this planet through our connection, communication, and community. And also our willingness to, go into that pure mind, and that willingness to also be really spiritually refined through our using technology to challenge us to be more in connection, communication, and community, not less, but to be in more of that, to have more responsibility of that, right? More accountability of that.